Evening, everyone. It's great to see your faces once again and the faces that we can't see online. Welcome to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Program Teacher Certification class. You can be seated for those who are here. Again, welcome to those who are online watching, who have been long-time participants in the class. Commenters, we do see your comments and we do thank you for your input and sharing how the Peaceful Solution has benefited you and benefited your life and the life of those who you have shared it with. We do appreciate that. That's how these things spread and get to different parts of the world. They grow and, people learn through us and through our example. So we appreciate it, and we appreciate you sticking with us and learning one person, one character at a time, because we are on the path of changing society. As we learn, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. Well, this is the kind of the fulfillment of the author's vision in seeing character education instilled, as Chris brought out before. It's not a brought back or reinstallation. It is instilling or taking it to or bringing it to society, really, for the first time. So welcome again to this class that we are on in. We are in the book, unit number 5 of the intermediate series, which is the responsibility unit. Now, we are still in the first chapter as we move through this, and we've been cruising along here for the last couple years. This is kind of like a deep dive, intensive training that you have as teachers, because remember, that's the goal. That's what the purpose of these classes is to train teachers, to teach you as teachers, so that you can go out and you have a greater insight and you have a little more foresight on what the outcome of the lessons are going to be, the purpose of the lessons and so forth beforehand. Got a little bit of experience, and you can hone in your skills and your abilities and so forth to present the message in a clear and concise way. Now it's laid out perfectly. It's laid out perfectly for the students, but sometimes as teachers, it's like these are the lyrics. Sometimes we have to add a little bit of music to it, and it makes it flow into the minds of the students a little bit easier. And that really is the job of the teacher. Now, any one of us can get up here and just dully read words out of the book. A is for accountability, and yes, you will essentially be teaching. But the goal is we want people to have a desire to learn and to put into practice the things that they're being taught. So yes, as teachers, it's not just getting up in front of a classroom or sitting down in front of a desk or standing at a podium, in front of a mic, in front of a audience of students and just reading words out of the book. No, the more we learn this information and the more we practice this information, it's not just something that's in our minds, but it's something that's a part of us. So it's easy to speak and talk about and relate and to interject things we've learned from the Peaceful Solution into conversations and say, well, if a person would have applied this character trait, or possibly the reason why they made this choice was because they weren't taught, or because they were influenced in this way, or because they see things in this particular pessimistic type of way. You see, we can actually interject some knowledge into a conversation instead of the garbage that everybody's talking about nowadays, and in the process actually educate the people who are listening to us. Right? The Peaceful Solution is not just what we do, but it's who we are as well, and we should make that our goal as teachers. And it's something that we live by 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Remember what we were talking about in being responsible, and how it's not the character trait of responsibility if you do something for the teacher that you like, but when the substitute teacher comes in, then you goof off, right? You slack off on your duties, or you're respectful to your friend's parents, but you're disrespectful to your parents, or you're disrespectful to your siblings and so forth, right? Consistency in our choices, consistency in our behavior is what makes us people of integrity. And it will eventually make our children people of integrity as well, when they, it almost needs to click, right? Something needs to click in a person's mind, because when you're on the learning side, which technically we all are, even as teachers, we're constantly learning. Every time, even when we open our mouths to speak, sometimes we kind of shock ourselves and go, "Oh man, I never thought about it that way." But yeah, but we're always learning. We're always students. But you know, you can hear something over and over and over again, but sometimes certain circumstances occur in your life that make what you're hearing make more sense. In other words, if you hadn't have experienced certain things or witnessed certain things or saw something displayed or put forth in a certain way, right? It might not. It just might have been okay. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. But sometimes it takes certain things to really make a point click, and everybody has that. It's independent to every particular person, but that's what we want for our students to get. We want the lessons that they're learning to click in their mind so that they see, okay, yeah, I understand the end goal of the peaceful solution, right? And so with that, they're going to carefully consider how they respond. They're going to consider their emotions. They're going to consider how they deal with, anger, right? They're gonna stop and think because they're thinking about the outcome, not just the immediate consequence that might come or the immediate reward that might come, but also down the road, how is it going to affect me? How is it going to affect my classmates? How is it going to affect my reputation? How is it going to affect my parents and my family and so forth? So it's a lot, but it's a little bit over time that builds and develops within the student's mind as they receive this information. So you're doing a great job in learning and practicing and teaching these things yourself, because it is helping to actually change the hearts and the minds. And first and foremost, we have to learn how to change or be taught how to change our hearts and minds. All right, so we're going to be continuing in chapter 1 here of the responsibility unit, and we're going to be picking up where William left off. And he was covering page 14 last class, and he finished off at the very top of page 15, and we're going to kind of go back and rehearse a little bit of what he talked about there. But before we do, let's just always kind of get ourselves back on track and let those who are watching, and if you're in the class, it'd be great opportunity to go back and just refresh in your mind. This is not something that you would read to your students in the procedures and so forth, the lesson plan. This is something that's specifically for the teacher. So before a class, it's great to go back and refresh in your mind what your purpose and objective is and in the lesson that you're going to be presenting that day. So let's look back here to page, let's see, well, we're on 14 and 15, 7, procedure 7. And it says here, inform students that another important aspect of being responsible is to be accountable for their actions. And of course, William covered that last class. Ask students what they think being accountable means, and of course, answers will vary. Stress that someone who is accountable accepts responsibility for his actions and faces the consequences of his choices without blaming others. It's not like that yeah, I kind of got a vision in my mind of, when you're getting ready to get in trouble and somebody went and got the switch or whatever it was, back in the day, and then person's running through the front yard, trying to escape the consequence that's coming. No, a responsible person will take accountability for their actions and so forth. Now that's kind of on a, young person type thing, but you see it also with in adults, right? People have they have made irresponsible choices, and you see this really big time in the financial market, where people who might be running hedge funds or could be dealing with stocks or something in that whole financial arena, they make a bad move, or they're engaging in deceptive practices where they're kind of skimming money off of their clients' accounts, and then something occurs and the news breaks, or they lose a big chunk of money, or the people go to cash out and find out, oh man, there's no money in the bank. Where are they off to? Offshore, Bahamas, some non-extradition country or something like that. It's the same thing, them trying to run and get away from the consequences instead of, as the old saying goes, facing the music. Well, we'll see here. They accept responsibility for their actions and face the consequences of their choices without blaming others. Now, that's a real big thing there. That's easy to do because in some way, shape, or form, it kind of, I guess naturally tends to make us feel better. It's kind of a self-defense mechanism, right? Well, why did you do this? Well, this person did this, or that person did that. And you find that when you deal with a lot of young people, well, why did you do this? Well, they were doing it too, or they pushed me, or they did this, or they said that, or I saw them do this. They don't want to go down by themselves, right? At the very least, they don't want to go down by themselves, but if they can, they will try to push the blame off on somebody else. Well, that's not taking accountability. Then it says, have students read the section A is for accountability, which was covered, found on page 14 and 15 of their handbooks, and choose students to read the scenario, which actually follows on 14 there. And we have, on 14. Have students answer and discuss the questions that follow. Stress that we cannot learn from our mistakes. Now, this is very important, and you see here that the instruction is given to the teacher. Stress that we cannot. So when you're stressing a point, you're making it very, very important in the mind of the student. Stress that we cannot learn from our mistakes if we are not accountable for our actions. And you can see that if you've ever grown up with somebody who's always displaced their accountability. They displace their responsibilities. They blame others as a child, and they continue in that pattern into adulthood. They're someone that you cannot depend on. As the old saying goes, I wouldn't trust that guy as far as I can throw him, right? Because they have a reputation that has preceded them because of the many, many, many years of being irresponsible, of casting blame, of not taking accountability, and so forth. Now, that's not to say that they can't change, because anybody can change. But the fact is either they haven't been taught, or they have and they've rejected it, right? Because they've become sedimentary, they've become comfortable in their lifestyle. They've kind of deceived themselves into thinking that the way that they're conducting their life is a-okay, right? I've heard people say, well, I'm not hurting anybody. Well, I tell a few white lies every now and then, No, black lie, I don't know, that's pretty bad. But a white lie every now and then is not too bad. I'm not hurting anybody. Well, the fact is, whenever we do anything that's immoral, it does bring harm. And we don't always see the consequences. Remember, we covered that in the respect unit and self-control and so forth. The consequences are not always immediate. If they were, I think people would learn a little bit faster, but the problem is it's not always that quick. All right, so let's look over here, back here to page 15. Before we go there, let's back it up a little bit to page 14, because I just want to cover this accountability. It says at the very top of the page on 14, it says another aspect of responsibility, or a responsible, character, is the willingness. Now, you notice here is the willingness to answer for your choices and behavior, which shows it shows that this is not something that can necessarily be forced. Not that you would want to force something, but a person has to, from within, have a willingness to answer for their choices. Now, we've been in situations where we've talked to people. We might have even seen them do a particular thing, and then when they're confronted on it, to try to get them to fess up or to confess, what they just did, to kind of tell on themselves, and no, it wasn't me. No, I didn't do that. But this is you right here on the camera. Right. It's not even a Sasquatch footage. It's clear digital imagery. No, that wasn't me. That must have been somebody in a mask. It wasn't me. Some people, when they're like in this mindset of delusion, I think sometimes they actually believe that it wasn't them. I don't know. But the point is, they have to be willing. You can't force them to tell the truth, even if the truth is sitting right there in the person's face. Well, this is where patience and so forth comes in, and you've seen it in the old cop shows, and they'll take the person in the interrogation room, and here comes the bad cop, and I'll rip you a new one, blah blah blah. You better tell me where you do it. And then the other cop comes in. Listen, my buddy, he's a little high strung, but listen, we can make you a deal, if you just do it. So, but the whole purpose is to get the person to testify, right? Now, some of these things are falsified and pushed. I'm not saying it's always the right way, but sometimes, the evidence is there. They say the proof is in the pudding. But the person has to be willing to answer for their choices and their behavior. In other words, you see what this is called? It's called accountability. People who are accountable, notice they accept the consequences of their actions and learn from their choices or the choices they have made. On the other hand, people who are not accountable for their actions blame others for the choices they have made and make excuses for their actions. Excuses. No, excuses. You know what an excuse does? It excuses you from the responsibility or the consequence. Well, everybody's going to have, going to have to stay here for detention. Well, I'm just going to kindly excuse myself from the room while everybody else stays for detention, right? But it's not necessarily something that's physical. It's something that in a lot of cases you see coming forth from people's mouths. It's the goal is to excuse themselves from a particular situation or a consequence that's going to come as a result of choices that have been made. And I think we've all made excuses. I know that I have many, many times, and sometimes we'll make excuses to do things that we really want to do. And that kind of gets into justification and so forth. All right, so let's look over to page 15 here at the very top. We're just going to move forward. It says accepting responsibility for your actions means being honest with yourself and admitting that you are wrong. Being honest. And, that I'm going to go back real quick to the character unit, because that's one of the first traits that one of the first group of traits that we went over in the character unit there, in the positive character traits, and honesty was one of the main things, but sadly people are not always honest with themselves. Even in some degree, of course, if you're not very honest with yourself, it can contribute to you not being honest with others, because how we treat ourselves essentially is also how we treat others, generally speaking. But when we're not honest with ourselves, we kind of do ourselves an injustice, right? Because we don't give ourselves the opportunity to learn from our mistakes or learn from our poor choices or our bad choices, and then receive the instruction from an authoritative figure, a parent, a teacher, a counselor, right? On what we need to do to make the change. Like we said before, if a person has the mindset, I'm perfect, I can do no wrong, there's no room for growth with them, right? It's hard to teach them. They're not just an old dog, as you say, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, they're the top dog, right? You can't teach a person in that attitude because they're not willing to learn. They don't think that there's anything that you can do to add to them because they know it all. But when you're honest with yourself, you can admit when you're wrong. And if we go back here to, just write for your notes, the character unit, chapter 1, page 17, under honesty, it says someone who is honest is going to be trusted to tell the truth, right? Now, this is also primarily in interacting with other people. You're going to be trusted to tell the truth when someone comes and they ask you a question or they present some information to you, and they might need to find out a little bit of information about something that's taking place in the school or in the class or whatever the case might be, at home if you're dealing with your parents. But it says they're trusted to tell the truth even when they do something wrong. Sometimes other people Even your friends can pressure you to do something that is dishonest. Now, this is where you find out in a lot of cases what a true friend is. Now, we didn't really get deep into that in this chapter, but we learned in the unit to follow, which was unit 2, the acceptance unit in chapter 4, what it means to be friends. What should you look for in a friend, and so forth. And understanding this, laying the foundation of understanding character and how it's built and what we should look for in dealing with others, and separating the personality from the character so that we can kind of get to the core of the apple to see what we're engaging with. But it says a friend here, notice here, doesn't leave the student hanging. A friend who truly cares about you, however, will encourage you to make an honest choice. So you have some people who are even your friends, question really if they're truly your friends, right? Can pressure you to do something that is dishonest. Now, why would someone engage in something that's dishonest under the pressure of their friends or their peers? Well, you remember what we learned about the desire to fit in, to be accepted, to conform. We covered that in the acceptance unit, right? And a lot of people have that desire. And if you're honest with yourself, or if the student is honest with themselves, they're going to realize, yes, I want to be a part of this friend group. I want to be accepted by them and so forth. But separate that. Let's just set that over here, and let's pick up this matter here. Set that right here. What are they asking me to do? Now let's dissect that a little bit. Is what they're asking me to do going to bring harm to myself, others, or the environment? Is it going to bring a benefit to myself, others, or the environment? How is it going to affect my reputation? How are others going to see me? So there's a little list of questions, kind of like a flow chart that a person has to go through before they make a choice. Because being accepted is one thing, nothing wrong with wanting to be accepted, right? But making an immoral choice in order to be accepted by a group of friends, it's not the right thing. Because what is that going to do? That's going to lead your friends into thinking that you're an easy target. And so they'll continue to pressure you more and more and more and more, because they're seeing what they can do to push your buttons in order to get you to do something. Okay. So, you have to stand up, as we teach, for what you've proven to be morally correct, even if you're the only one standing. And you'll see over a period of time, it's like it says here, a friend can pressure you to do something that's dishonest. Well, what occurs when the authorities come, or the teachers come, or the law enforcement comes, and you're left there holding the bag? What are your friends going to do? They're like roaches when the lights come on, they're all gone. Nobody's got your back. You know what I mean? Of course, a person who would have had your back would have been trying to encourage you not to do what the other people were trying to get you to do to begin with. And that's a rare breed of people, so to speak, a rare character of people, but they are out there. They are, for sure. For example, a true friend would encourage you not to cheat on a test or steal something from a store. A true friend would always be honest with you. When you are honest, you will be trusted, and you can avoid conflicts with others. You see that honesty builds that reputation for you being trusted by others. That trust there is not something that's just automatically given. Okay, people have to see that you're dependable. They have to see that you're not going to come in and steal from them. They have to see that you're not going to put on this false face in front of them, and then as soon as you walk away, well, here they are going through your things. They're on your computer. They're going, looking up your possessions, or they're trying to take something or someone who belongs to you, or whatever the case might be. Your example will help others to make honest choices. You will be honest. Yeah, you will be honest with the possessions of others too, always remembering to ask permission before touching, using, borrowing, or taking something that belongs to them. When you are known as an honest person, now you see here, we see what the kind of the the icing on the cake here that follows. So you get the lay down here of what it means to be honest, examples of friends that might persuade you to do something dishonest, or a true friend that would persuade you to not do something that's dishonest, right? How you can avoid conflicts. Then you get this bottom sentence here. It says, when you are known, which is something that comes over a period of time. When you are known by your pattern of behavior. Well, what is the preceding factors in your patterns of behavior? Well, your choices. Nobody can immediately see your choice, right? Because the choice takes place in your mind, but they can see the results of your choices by what you do. But even before that, you have the whole thinking process, the thoughts, right? The thinking or the thoughts that eventually will lead to the actions. Now, they don't have to. A particular pattern of thinking, well, a pattern more than likely would, but an instant thought does not necessarily need to lead to an action. Remember how we talked about in previous classes, you've got a window of opportunity right there in between that thought, and of course you've got the feeling, and you've got the action where you can actually think about the thought and the consequences that will come about before you act. So you're not acting impulsively. Remember, a person who acts impulsively is one who acts without considering the consequences, right? So you can actually be a rational thinker in these situations and say, you know what? Yeah, listen, guys, I really want to fit in, but I just don't think that's going to be the wisest choice. Someone can get hurt. Like people go in there and I dare you to pull the fire handle or the fire alarm in the school, right? Things could get wet, things get ruined, or the fire department's got to come out. It's going to displace. Yeah, but we'll get out of school early. Yeah, what else are we going to have to deal with? So a person who doesn't act impulsively, they stop and they think, and sometimes it might not do any benefit to explain that to the people who are trying to convince you, because their minds are set on having fun, or being mischievous or whatever the case. Sometimes you just have to turn and walk away, right? And separate yourself from that group of people so you're not a guilty party in their activities. So when you are known as an honest person, you will not be persuaded to do something that brings harm to yourself or others. People will trust you with more responsibility. And it's like, I often question, why is it that some people go to certain people and they feel comfortable, talking to them about, certain immoral behaviors or choices or thoughts or whatever the case might be. And they don't go to others because they feel comfortable, because that person they might see as a person of the same habit, right? Well, this person's not going to correct me if I'm wrong. They're not going to tell me, they're not going to teach me this peaceful solution stuff, if they're in that mindset. They call these people, you're a goody two-shoe or Mr. or Mrs. Uppity or brown noser, why? Because you want to make the right choice? Well, I'll take that. I'd rather have that reputation than be the reputation of the person who's going out and living life by the edge of their seat, and getting in trouble and being in and out of juvenile hall, homes and detention centers and so forth, right? I'd rather have the freedoms that come with being a person of integrity and making responsible choices. But anyway, let's see here. So let's look there at the very top there. Okay, so we're talking about honesty, being honest with yourself and admitting that you're wrong. Okay, let's see here. When you admit that you are wrong, you give yourself, now this is very important here, and William started covering this here a little bit too. He says, when you admit that you are wrong, you give yourself an opportunity to change, mature, and grow. To give yourself the opportunity to change, mature, and grow. Now remember here, it says, when you admit, let's see here, got a definition. What am I supposed to Okay. This here, this is a simple one here. Put it on the overhead here for the definition of the word admit. And it means to concede as true or valid. Now remember, when you admit that you're wrong, now when you admit that you're wrong, right, it's kind of like when you see the elections take place, and sometimes people, at a certain point they'll say, all right, I concede, right? Not that necessarily they were wrong, but I concede this race, this political race that we're engaging in, okay? But to concede as valid or true, so you're the person who's got the most votes, you're the person who's going to be in this office or whatever. But we're talking about us and being honest with ourselves. To concede as valid or true, yeah, I broke the dish. Yeah, I wrote the funny face on the board, or yeah, I stole this out of your desk, right? This is valid. This is true. I'm admitting, I'm conceding, that I did something that's wrong. It also says to make acknowledgement or to give. Now, the last definition says is to give entrance or access, right? When we admit something, we give the opportunity for, now metaphorically speaking, access to be corrected. Something to, we give ourselves, or we give access to correction and instruction, to enter into our hearts and our minds, right? It's when a person who doesn't want to admit when they're wrong, it's like they're locked up. They don't want to hear anything you say. I don't want to hear it. I don't believe it. I didn't do it. It wasn't me. Go somewhere else. So they don't give access to the teacher or to the counselor or to the parent or whatever, to give them the opportunity to instruct them to say, hey, listen, this is what you did. This is wrong. This is why it was wrong. Now, this is how you need to fix it. This is what you need to do to fix it. This is how you need to set your mind in advance. You see, they totally robbed themselves of the opportunity to change, mature, and grow, okay? Because they're not honest with themselves. Otherwise, now, if you don't do this, or when you admit when you're wrong, you give yourself that opportunity. Otherwise, you will continue to make the same poor choices over and over again. And we know what that leads to, right? Young people might not realize it, but it is. It's kind of like, are you insane, man? You're doing this over and over. I'm gonna throw the ball just to see if it can bounce off the window. Oh boy, we got the window replaced. Okay, let me just try one more time. Just oh boy. Let me just try one more time, No, you keep breaking the window every time you throw the ball or the rock at it, right? It's not going to change. What you've got to do is make a different choice in order to get different results. I want to see. I don't want to read this whole thing here, but it's kind of interesting. They had an article, kind of like a study on, kind of the benefits of what takes place when you admit that you're wrong, admitting that you're wrong. Let me finish reading this paragraph here. It says, when you admit that you are wrong, you give yourself an opportunity to change, mature, and grow. Otherwise, you will continue to make the same poor choices over and over again. People who choose not to be accountable, now notice here, they make excuses for their actions. Remember we said earlier, that's excusing yourself from the consequences that might follow as a result of your actions, or that will follow as a result of your actions. Or notice they shift the blame onto someone else. Now remember in I think it was chapter 3 of the self-control unit, when we were talking about controlling your anger, and we talked about the 3 anger styles. Well, that doesn't only apply to anger, right? People can displace their blame or their responsibilities onto other people as well, right? So they displace, those consequences on others. That's their hope, to displace it, to get it off of them and let somebody else deal with it when they shift the blame, okay? Well, this little article here, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm just going to try to pull out bits and pieces. But it says here, it's talking about when we admit that we're wrong. and the benefits of it. It says, when facts challenge our beliefs, our natural reaction might be to reject them, and we might even feel insulted. Correspondingly, we desire to believe ourselves, possibly more than anything else, right? And you see there, when facts challenge our beliefs, and remember how beliefs are formed over a period of time from influences and so forth, teachings, values, that you've accumulated over the years from your family, your friends, people in your environment, and experiences that you've had. They help to kind of form and solidify a pattern of beliefs. Now, those beliefs could be right, they could be wrong, could be a mixture of the two, which is in most cases. But kind of the natural reaction is when those things are challenged. Well, we kind of buck up. We feel insulted. In other words, we don't want to believe we're wrong, even when we are. One might refer to this as cognitive dissonance, and I think William brought out a little bit of this before in his class, which a sociologist defines as a state of tension that occurs when a person holds two cognitions, which is ideas, attitudes, beliefs, or opinions that are psychologically inconsistent. In other words, they don't mesh together, right? With that being said, having the capacity to admit when we're wrong is an immense strength. Now, this is coming from a website that talks about psychology and so forth. It says when you admit you're wrong, it's not seen as a weakness, because there's a lot of people in society, they think, oh, well, he admits he's wrong. He's a weak man. I would have stood up and I would have stood my grounds. Right? I'm not going to be wrong, especially in front of my family and my friends and my employees here. Right? Well, you see, that has actually the opposite effect in the eyes of those who look up to you. It's also a quality that will earn a person, it says here, a great deal of respect among peers and colleagues. Now, it says admitting when you're wrong here is a sign of strong character. And that's exactly what we teach in the Peaceful Solution. Yes, it is a sign of strong character. It's a sign of a person who is also humble, right? Because a humble person won't mind admitting that they're wrong, because they know what we just got finished reading here. It gives them an opportunity to change, mature, and grow. Now, that's if they want to change, mature, and grow. Some people are totally set in their ways. Even young people, they're kind of really set in their ways. I've seen young people who just kind of, I don't know, they just kind of seem like they've got this mopey, hey, you want to go out and, like take a walk? I guess so. I mean, there's nothing else to do. It's like they have no zest or zeal for life, right? And it's like you try to encourage them or introduce things, to their life that would lead to a positive change. And it's not that it's impossible, but sometimes you have to work a little harder and a little longer and employ different methods to find that one thing, because there's always that one thing that is appealing to somebody. Deep down inside, there's that one thing that they can relate to, that they like, that they want to do, and that's the one thing that you have to, kind of reach in and tie into what you're teaching, so that they will learn and want to make a change in their life. But that comes with the care and compassion from the side of the teacher. Never ever think that a person is too bad to change, or too far gone to improve. That's not our place as a teacher. Our place is to find an opening, an entryway where we can connect with the student to teach them the peaceful solution, to give them the opportunity to choose, to make the right choice. Now, it says here, individuals in positions of authority have a tendency to avoid admitting when they are wrong. This is somewhat understandable, as they don't want people to begin questioning their legitimacy or competency. Yet this Amy Reese Anderson highlights in Forbes, so often in business, I deal with people who believe that admitting they're wrong shows weakness or ineptness. The danger of that belief, especially when it is held by people in positions of power and authority, is that it backs a leader into defending their poor choices, even when they themselves have come to recognize they are wrong. And then they go on to say, success in both our professional and private lives is heavily dependent on our ability to cultivate and maintain relationships, and this can't be accomplished without trust. Well, of course, when we are seen to be a person who is honest, when we admit our mistakes or our poor choices, we admit that we're wrong, then people can trust us. They know that, hey, listen, all right, this guy, sometimes he doesn't always make the right choice. Sometimes he makes mistakes. Sometimes he'll turn right around and do the opposite of the thing you told him. And when you confront him about it, at least he's honest about it. I've always said, man, I can work with somebody who can at least be some people are a little too honest, Not that you could ever be too honest, but, it's kind of like never, it's a trap, man. Never answer the question, does this make me look fat? I'm just saying, don't ever answer that question. You got to use a little bit. Remember we covered about diplomacy? Right, about that in the previous units. Sometimes you got to use a little bit of diplomacy, but you've got to use tact and things. But when you're seen as someone who is honest, people know that they can trust you. Okay, and they can work with somebody who is like that because they're going to say, listen, I made a mistake. I don't think I did this the right way, and so forth, and then they can learn. Kind of like when a person cheats, in the classroom. The students cheating in the classroom where they're being dishonest, right? They're being irresponsible. And they don't realize it then because in their mind, they're thinking, all right, I passed the class, so I can go and I can play sports or do whatever the case might be. I don't have to go to summer school. But they've really done themselves an injustice and stolen from them their own self the opportunity to learn, because now when they're faced with having to deal with that in life, right, basic math, or reading, or whatever the case might be, now they're like, oh man, I don't know how to do that, right? But at the time, it seemed like a really great idea when they were cheating in class, okay? And so that's one of those delayed consequences that occurs. Let's see here. So it says, just finishing up, it says, admitting you've made an error might make things difficult in the short run, yet it is better to clean up a mess now than to leave it sitting there in the sink. Leaving it to sit there to stink up the room permanently, more metaphorically speaking. And so that was just kind of an interesting article there that they were acknowledging, especially from the standpoint of a leader, because remember, that's what we're also training the young men and women to become as leaders. And these are characteristics that have to be there. And we covered that in the unit in talking about leadership and what a leader is not, right? A leader doesn't blame others for their mistakes. A leader is accountable for the choices that they make and so forth. Yep, they admit when they're wrong. Yep, they'll even admit to the people who work underneath them, listen, guys, I know I said this is the way I wanted to do it. That wasn't a great choice. Okay, now we've got to work on figuring something else out. Anybody have any ideas, right? They'll get the input from others. They know that they're not always going to be the smartest person in the room. And you even see that in corporations. You see that in governments. I think Henry Ford was quoted one time. They were kind of brought him in a court trial and so forth because they kind of felt that he was monopolizing the market, and they were questioning him about his knowledge on the manufacturing of cars, right, and the assembly line process and everything. And I don't remember exactly what they asked him, but they asked him, do you know how an alternator works or whatever the case might be? And he said, why would I need to know that, right? I can just simply go to my guy who is an engineer for alternators, and I can ask him, and I can get the answer that way. I don't have to know all these things to run a business and so forth. And that's the thing. Even in our students. In dealing with our students, we want to encourage them and leave a door open so that if they're dealing with a difficult decision, right, they might be facing a moral choice, a situation where they have to make a moral choice and they're really uncertain. We want to leave the door open where they can come to us and ask us for advice, right? We don't want them going to their friends who's probably never been to a peaceful solution class in their life. We don't want them getting their ideas or examples from movies and video games and so forth. We want them to go to a source, a trusted and reliable source. Remember, we've got to build that trust within their hearts and minds too by not only what we say, but our attitudes and how we conduct ourselves. Yes, even when we're off the clock, so to speak. because you never know who's watching you. It really is a small world. You think you might be somewhere off by yourself, and here's somebody driving by. Oh man, I saw the teacher over there beating up a cat or something. It's like, oh, that's not a moral choice. I mean, you just never know. I mean, and so we have to be on guard. Like I said at the beginning of the class, this is a way of life for us, the peaceful solution. It's something we live 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All right. So let's look down the straight talk here. All right, perfect. Look down the straight talk. Just for your notes there, on at the very last paragraph on shifting the blame on other people, you can write then character unit and chapter 6 and page 30. I just want to read that really, really, really quick because we did cover that. I mentioned it on leadership, leadership on page 131, and just a few points. And number 3 there, page 131 and number 3. That's for the last sentence in the very top paragraph there on page 15 in the responsibility unit. So in the character unit, chapter 6, page 131, number 3, under be a positive leader, it says positive leaders are responsible for their actions. Same thing we're talking about now. A characteristic of being positive or responsible is a combination of following through on your task, which we covered that at the very beginning of this chapter here, and being responsible for your actions. But it also includes not blaming others for your mistakes, but learning from them. Not blaming others for your mistakes or for your mistakes, but actually taking the time to learn from them. And like I said, it takes humility, and this humility is something that also has to be taught. But when a person is willing to be humble and they have a greater goal, your goal has to be greater than just not getting in trouble at this time, right? Oh man, I don't want to get in trouble. Oh man, what are we going to say? We're going to have detention, or I'm going to have to be on punishment for like 2 weeks. I'm going to be grounded or whatever. Well, all right. I'm sure there might be an immediate consequence, but you have to look beyond that and look at the opportunity that you're being given to learn something, right? Everything that we do has consequences, beneficial or negative, or not beneficial. Every action, there's a reaction. So we're wanting to mitigate those poor choices that'll lead to the consequences by educating you now and helping you to see the benefit of stopping and thinking, considering your options, and proceeding with the right choice. It's not going to be a mistake-free life, but even mistakes can be eliminated by having enough education, to know what's right and what's wrong, and then having the willingness, the determination, and so forth, and sometimes a little bit of foresight to go, you know what? Yeah, this could end up bad. I don't think I want to do that. Right? I'm gonna stand out on this one, guys. Right. So under straight talk there, it says trying to hide that you have made a bad choice by blaming someone else is not going to change what you have done. Kind of like, well, I'm just going to rewrite history a little bit here. Just change a little bit of how this war took place. Right? Scribe, come here, scribe. Okay, now I know you saw it, but I really want you to write this down. I came in there with my big sword, right? I had a big sword, right? Right? Just because they rewrite it doesn't change the facts, right? Just because you blame someone else doesn't change the fact that you did it, okay? And eventually the truth does come out. Sometimes it takes a long, long time. We've seen this even in these cold cases that you see on the news, and a lot of times since the advent of DNA sequencing and so forth, and being able to pull things 20 years later, they've been able to pull certain DNA out of pieces of evidence and sadly, find out that this guy that's been sitting in prison for 20 years had nothing to do with it, but this other guy, actually had something to do with it. Okay. But trying to hide that you made a bad choice by blaming someone else is not going to change what you have done. Oftentimes, other people can see that you are the one at fault. So, the only person you deceive is yourself. And I mentioned that a little bit earlier in the class about deception or deceiving ourselves, right? There's a terminology here called self-deception. Let me pull this one off and replace it with this one. There we go. So self-deception there, it is the act or an instance of deceiving oneself, okay, makes sense, or the state of being deceived by oneself, especially concerning one's true nature. In other words, somebody doesn't want to admit that they're a liar, they're a thief, right? They're irresponsible, or whatever the case might be. Their true nature, feelings, etc. Self-deception is a process of denying or rationalizing away the relevance, significance, or importance of opposing evidence and logical argument. That opposing evidence or logical argument, in most cases, is going to be a teacher, a parent, a counselor, hopefully not, but a police officer telling, hey, you broke the law. You did something wrong. You engaged in something that's immoral. You stole this. You were late. You didn't keep your word, right? You were dishonest. That's the logical evidence that's being presented to them. Self-deception involves convincing oneself of a truth or lack of truth so that one does not reveal any self-knowledge of the deception, right? In other words, they want to stay in that state so that they don't have to admit that they knew what they were doing was wrong, okay? And people can fall into that, and sadly, people get so deep into that. Remember, it's like a pattern of behavior, and we talked about your subconscious mind and how your subconscious mind, it is objective, or it's not objective. I can't remember how that goes. In other words, it doesn't differentiate between a truth or a lie, right? It doesn't differentiate between being serious or telling a joke. It doesn't differentiate between what you're literally seeing take place in front of your eyes on the street versus what you see take place on the television, right? And so if you continue to tell yourself over and over and over again, this is a truth, this is the truth, and like we've said before, sometimes it's your truth. It's because it's your truth doesn't mean it's the truth, because people sometimes they're content to believe lies, right? Even if they're the ones making them up, and they can get to a point where they actually deceive themselves or they delude themselves in believing a particular thing that they've said over many years is true. And so it can be hard to work with somebody who is in that situation. But again, like I said, it's not impossible. You just kind of break down those mental barriers that they have placed around their brain. So although it is not easy to admit you have made a bad choice, it can be done. If you want to build a responsible character, it must be done. In other words, admitting that we've made a bad choice, acknowledging that we've made a mistake. And and I've seen this in times past, and I think we all have in dealing with other people. Sometimes people, because they're in that pattern of behavior, they're in that frame of thinking. Some people, it's like they said, I've heard people say, that person couldn't tell the truth to save their life, because they're so hung up on not wanting to suffer a consequence. And in a lot of cases, it's not even that serious, right? I've seen people who get pulled over by police, and the officer says, hey, I seen you're not wearing your seatbelt, and I'm wearing my seatbelt. What are you talking about? You put your seatbelt on afterwards. We saw you. Me and my other officer here, we saw that you didn't have your seat. Oh, you guys, you just want to oppress people. You just want to, I seen one guy, he threw his money out. Here's my money. Take it all. What? He just flew off the handle. And the officer's like, sir, it's only like a $10 fine. He literally ripped up and threw out $500 cash out of his window, because he felt like he was being oppressed. And it's like, it's not even that serious, man. It's $10. You probably spent that much on snacks, when you stopped at the Piggly Wiggly or whatever, and it's like some people, they're so caught up in not wanting to be wrong. No, I had my seatbelt on, Okay, well, you have it on now. It wasn't when we saw you, okay? And so they kind of make a mountain out of a molehill, but if he would have just admitted or acknowledged, Or he could have just said nothing. You know, you have the right to remain silent. He would have got his $10 ticket and he would have been down the road, right? This guy literally almost got himself tased, you know, over a $10 ticket, you know, not even I guess a citation ticket. It's all the same thing. All right. So the next time you make a bad decision, don't blame someone else. Be honest. Now notice here, be courageous. Be honest. Be courageous. Courageous. Why would you need to be courageous? You know, with a lot of young people and adults as well, there's that fear of the consequence. There's the fear of having something taken away, the fear of loss, the fear of being embarrassed, or whatever the case might be, the fear of looking bad in the presence of other people. You got to be courageous and do the right thing in spite of that fear. Okay? And this is something that sometimes is deeply rooted. People just don't want to admit when they're wrong. And it's all people in general. You know, we all can fall into that trap. Sometimes it's a little stronger with men with our testosterone, and you know, we always, you know, we want to be right, right? But, you know, a real man of character will admit when he's wrong. Okay? It applies for women too. So be honest, be courageous, and admit your mistake. Learn from it, and be determined not to make the same mistake again. And in the character unit here, I want to go back real quick here because that's a great point that's mentioned in there about not making the same mistake. Let me make sure I'm in the right chapter 4. I'm sorry, page 89. I thought it was page 4. Chapter 4, page 89 in the character unit about our mistakes. In page 89, it says, keep the following in mind in order to learn from your mistakes. And we'll just real quick go through the points. It says, acknowledge that you made a mistake, right? Trying to justify it, justify a wrong by not being truthful with yourself and others will prevent you from taking steps for improvement. 2, use character to maintain character. If you did something that was irresponsible, then be honest with yourself, admit it, right? Admit it, and plan to never make that mistake again. In other words, you will always have a positive character traits to draw from. That's if you're willing to move forward. Number 3, ask yourself, what should I learn from this? Now that's going to come with maturity and a person who has the mindset of wanting to grow, wanting to improve their character. You know, they're not going to just be upset and you know, like a raging lunatic because they were corrected or something was taken away from them or a privilege was, you know, suspended from them or whatever. They're going to stop and think, okay, what can I learn from this? Because again, that's going to give you the opportunity to grow. Change your attitude about making mistakes. Instead, consider them as lessons to be learned. Once you have learned them, just think about how much smarter you will be. And number 4, don't put yourself down or call yourself names when you make a mistake. This will only lead to feeling bad about yourself, and a negative attitude can leave you susceptible to negative influences because that negative attitude and that negative self-talk is a predecessor to, instead of those rose-colored glasses, it'll be those stormy, dark glasses, you know, and everything you see and everybody who interacts with you is going to be, you know, you're going to look at them in a pessimistic type of way. Okay. And it says here at the last, it says, even if you have made mistakes in your past that you now regret, it is not too late to change and turn your life around. Prepare so you will never make that mistake again. Remember, where there is determination, there is hope. So if you are not taught the value of obtaining a positive moral character and you have been negatively influenced, you can learn from your mistake. Set your mind in advance right now to stand up and make choices that will build a positive moral character. Also be determined not to repeat past mistakes. Instead, focus on maintaining your positive character traits. Do the best you can to avoid making mistakes by setting your mind in advance and being prepared to handle curveballs and pitfalls. But if you do make a mistake, don't give up on maintaining your positive character. Give yourself room to grow and consider them as lessons learned. And at the very bottom there, the little piggy in the mire in the mud, it says, don't wallow in the mud. Pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and get on the right track to a true moral character. And that takes determination. Like I says, it takes seeing the bigger picture, right? Because what we do and the choices we make, yes, they affect us, but they're bigger than us. Because of that ripple effect, they can go out and they can affect society in either a positive way if they're great choices or a negative way. And eventually those ripples are going to come back and they're going to affect us. So we want to stop and think. We want to get our students to stop and think about these things, especially when it comes to being responsible for, or being accountable, which is a part of responsibility, for their actions, for their choices. All right. So we're going to stop right there on page 15, and we'll pick up next class on December 10th, which is going to be this coming Sunday at 5:30 Central Standard Time. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you at next class.